jewel, new crystal in the making. And well, we have George. He's okay. He's okay. And the recording is on. So okay, everyone. Thank you so much for coming over here this week. Summer after graduation. So much, the energy is just completely different. Yeah, completely different. But the goal is the same. So we meet every week to philosophize about different topics. And today is laws and different type of laws, which we're gonna go more in depth during this meeting. My name is Ferdinando, and I'm supposed to be a moderator for this conversation alongside our advisor, sorry, not Luca, Jeffrey Mancy. So, yeah, I will explain a little bit the house rules. So, for those who are new, we have a chat, so please make sure you can access that chat. Normally, the way it goes is for us to know who's going to be speaking first or last. We write an exclamation mark in the conversation because if you raise your hand, I cannot completely tell who raised it first or whatever. So it will take, it is just more cumbersome. And if you want to reply to us, current conversation, feel free to raise your hand, but we're not going to use that to open any new topic. Besides that, please look us up in social media. We're everywhere: YouTube, Instagram. Instagram a little bit slower, but Twitter is still on point. And we're working on a Facebook and also on, so it's all good. And we also have a website. And if you want to be part of our email list to keep updated on the different weekly meetings, please just either put your email in the chat or just private message me and I will take care of the rest. With that being said, Nancy, if you have any announcement, this is your time. Otherwise, we just go straight to the point.
Yeah, I think there was some sort of miscommunication. I thought today's topic was lulls, LOL. I thought it was about that.
Terrible.
Yeah,
Oh, it's about
we just lost half of our audience right now. We just
Okay. Yeah, I have nothing else to add. Thank you, Fernando, for again informing everybody of our presence on social media. If you are interested, if you have a creative or artistic side and you would like to design Instagram posts based around the various topics that we look at every week, you want to get a little creative philosophically with the design, let us know. We're looking for people who want to, I suppose, grow our presence on social media as well as just maintain it. I think we have close to 300 followers on Instagram. So yeah, looking to build. Again, graduation just passed. A number of our officers have since moved on. So, props to Fernando for continuing to join us over the summer, even though he has no obligation to do so. Very cool of him. But yeah, if you're interested in maybe playing a bigger role in this kind of thing, if you believe in philosophy and believe that there's a place for philosophy and philosophers in Dallas, and you want to, again, be part of that movement, by all means, reach out to me. All right, having said that, I guess we'll get into the topic, which is, again, laws. LAWS. Lots of different ways we can go here. But you know what? Rather than me kind of just throwing something out, let me ask, where would you like to take this conversation? Because again, there are different kinds of laws, which is what I think is going to be the real cool part of this conversation, is just beginning to sort of, I guess, disentangle different kinds of laws from one another while still understanding the need for them to be entangled. Or perhaps if they're a little too entangled, that's a problem. So again, different kinds of laws could be anything from natural law, which is to say natural comes from nature, so the laws of nature. These are laws that seemingly cannot be, I suppose, stopped, although maybe technology is, fighting against that on some level. Think of like anti-gravitational chambers and stuff like that. We also have, of course, more, I guess, cultural or I might say religious-based laws. Now, these aren't natural. These might be called supernatural because most divine sources transcend the laws of nature. So there are certain laws, quote unquote, and we can get into that, that have to do with one's culture, one's religion, this kind of thing. Irregardless of, I suppose, that's not a word, regardless of, I guess, the particular type of divine law, we could just say there are divine laws. And then, of course, you have the more concrete laws, such as societal laws, the laws that seem to govern society in a way that should be practical. So again, what happens if you have societal laws or codes of conduct, where if you transgress them, you will receive punishment? What happens when laws such as those run up or run aground against more divinely sourced laws? Um, how does that sort of spell itself out in terms of an individual and one's rights, placed within the greater context of a community and a governed community, which is again another word for society? So yeah, that's kind of the opening salve, if you will. Yeah, what do y'all think? Have you ever thought about laws, or just about breaking them? Hey,
Well, we're definitely breaking them. Um, okay. I We have George as the first one who wants to speak up, and then I will read something about Luca.
Just kind of shooting from the hip here. Two thoughts. I would probably separate divine law from cultural law. When I think of cultural law, I think of like the unwritten rules of like what it means to be like polite or rude in a culture, or like, do you know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah, I understand. I mean,
culture
but
values.
I think this is a good point to start then with that question because, I mean, to some degree, we can say that religion influenced the culture.
Well,
So,
sure, there's definitely this going on, right?
mhm,
Um, but again, I think it's worth noting the distinction there, um, where divine laws are super religious in nature, claiming to come from God Himself, whereas like I don't know, in this culture we greet each other with handshakes, or in this culture we value freedom, whereas other cultures value family and traditions and so forth. Those are they relate to each other. They play off of each other, but they should be distinguished, I think, a little bit.
okay. But I have a
If
question.
we're going to be
This is
careful
this is
about it.
why I am so intrigued with that this being the first question, because Christianity in other countries, like every country practice Christianity a bit different. So, like even though it comes from the same God, like people kind of like follow that law differently based on their culture. So how can we know exactly what part is divine law and when is cultural law?
That's a good question. It's a good question.
Yeah. So I don't know if my
Coming
face
from
is
an
too white.
evangelical Protestant perspective, we lean heavily on the Bible, and yeah, with any religious text, there's going to be the question of interpretation that we don't have to get into. Um, Suffice it to say, there are some common rules and laws that Christians generally agree on. So you could say from that standpoint. Um, Guess I'm a little sleepy today, folks. Yeah, my other thought, what was it? It'll come back to me. Y'all have the floor.
No, don't worry. It's fine. Right now, I'm just trying to like spark some ideas for different people so they can also intervene. I do want to say John Floyd, he is not here, but he's saying of all the meetings I have missed with sad face. So he really wants to be here. But he's participating in the chat somehow. Okay, so Ulrich, he said natural law, law of nature, divine law, law from God, social positive law, law of society, other laws, question mark, and then he wants the floor. So go ahead.
I also did want to say for the new person here, if they want a chance to speak, I don't know if you said to put the exclamation point. I could have
Yes,
not
I
been
said it. I said
okay.
it.
I could have not been paying attention.
Yeah, you were definitely not paying attention. That
Um,
should be a law. That should be a law here. You have to pay attention when I do the introduction.
I did want to add into this idea of because it's a really interesting first place to go is thinking about religious law, and um, then George said, yes, these are biblical. But of course, the problem is the Bible emerged. It wasn't there in the beginning, right? This is an emergent document. It's not something that is in the beginning of Christianity, and so there seems to have to be some type of cultural or law-like ability which is the driving force behind the putting together of that document. So whether you want to how you place it seems that you'd have to place that above the biblical text itself, because it's the thing that's the driving force through which the Bible comes to be. Either way, yes, even saying that we get the laws from the Bible doesn't get away from having to discuss how that came to be, which makes it interesting. So
This is one of those things that philosophy is always like different ways to see it. And well, some are very good and some others we're gonna see right now. So go ahead, Mansi. What is your intake?
Yeah, I just I love the conversation and where it started. I do want to say this. We do have to kind of be mindful of certain distinctions in terms of how people conduct themselves. So there are laws, and then there are just customs. So maybe it's customary to shake hands, but that's not a law. It's customary for me to brush my teeth every day. It's not a law, right? So what is it about a law that makes it unique? Well, it's because it has a certain authority to it. And so I just think that's important to keep in mind, because it seems like it's easier to disregard customs. Well, actually, maybe this is a question. Is it easier to disregard, customs or just the way that we've been routinized, routinely to behave with people just on a very basic human level that has nothing to do with anything deeper? Just to keep the peace, so to speak, to be copacetic. Is it easier to flaunt those kinds of customs, or is it easier to flaunt laws, especially laws that seemingly are up for interpretation, such as divine laws, and the countless denominations of religions that all claim to be equally faithful in their proposed interpretation, specifically when it comes to how that spells itself out in human behavior. And so that I mean action, not just intention or belief. I'll add my 2 cents before moving on. It does seem to me as though people are willing to maybe convert religions, but how do you convert customs and still be part of that society? I don't know. It might be easier to have different, deeper beliefs about the source of how one behaves, but still sort of get along on a very sort of, again, basic, well, you might just call it courtesy or being cordial to one another. That being cordial means respecting certain customs, not laws. But actually, it also means respecting laws, of course. Like, you're not going to murder somebody. But at the same time, it's important to keep in mind that customs seem to be more, I suppose, of a uniting force than belief in sort of divine laws and how to interpret them. Does that make sense? Do you see where I'm going with this?
Mansi, I think we missed you for like a whole 2 minutes. But I mean, I think I understood what you were trying to do. So okay, so then I understand what you're trying. But now the point is, then what is a law? Because okay, we have the written ones, which is easy. But if we're going to like divine law, whatever, like are those also like, do people sign that? Because sometimes people don't even like sign for like whatever they're following. They just were born there. For instance, like when in these countries that are so like in war for religion, like they didn't sign for that. They just were born there. So like, what does it make it a law then? If it is, I mean, beside this, the written one, so we can start making the differentiation between what it is a custom and what is a law.
Oh my God. Hey, hi.
Hello, Marcus. How are you doing?
I want to go off of that. Going off of Manzi. I want to imagine we talk about law, blah blah. I feel like we're so. Woof, let's dial it in. There had to be a first law or a first thing. Okay, imagine the first humans. Okay, blah blah. Someone does something and someone looks at that and goes, "Oh, I don't like that," and then others agree with that, and then it becomes customary, and then said law that it is not accepted. And the difference between that type of law and divine law is when you're agreeable with God. So that's and that's where the authority of each comes from, is the agreeableness. You were saying, Manzi, you know, we give authority to law. That's because it's agreed upon generally. If no one agreed upon it, it would have no authority generally, yeah, because it would just be chaos. So I think that gives us a basis of what a law is considered. Is it just about law? I kind of don't. I missed Manzi's opening, and then we were just talking about law, and then I was going off of that. Is it just, is the topic just law? Like, is that what it is?
Different types of law. So, you know,
Different
there's
types of law.
yeah,
Okay.
laws of nature, perhaps divine laws, human laws, secular laws. How do they all?
Okay, so yeah, there's a way to do that then. Natural law is everything agreed upon nature. Nature doesn't really let things happen that it doesn't want to, you know, because then it's like, that doesn't work. I don't agree with that. You can't make gold out of tin or something like that, okay? So that's a natural law. So I guess the whole purpose then of trying to understand law is to align all the laws in the most agreeable sense, right? That would, I would hope, wouldn't that be almost the end goal, or, you know, right? Otherwise, what's the point? Like, what, all right? We're trying to get to a point where we're all in agreement to the maximum, right? Someone tell me yes.
That sounds like utopia.
No. Oh, sorry. You.
Damn it.
Yes.
Um,
Yes. Of course. Absolutely. Huh.
and I'm trying to think of what more else to say about law. I don't know. That's how I understand law. Importance of law, following it, you know, breaking it. What does that mean? I don't know. Someone tell me.
Yes. Okay.
Well,
But we
let me.
do have George in the queue, so maybe I don't know if he has some idea in
What
that
were you
regard.
gonna say, Manzi? Go ahead. What were you gonna say, Manzi?
I'm going to respond real quick, and I'll move to George. Yeah, I mean, just to get us on the same page, the talking point, the topic is what happens specifically, like what is the relationship between all these laws? And one way to get at that would be, well, what happens when two laws are seemingly disparate? They can't necessarily, they're incommensurable. So an example might be something like, I don't know. Everybody must behave in such a way where we make sure that everybody is safe at all times so that nobody can get hurt and so that nobody can die. That might be a civil law. Here's a natural law. Everybody dies. So what are we to do about, again, this is a very basic kind of starting point, but you know, to make it a bit more tangible, there does seem to be natural laws that are at odds with other laws in human society. What are we to make of that? The queue is blowing up right now. All right, I'll be quiet. Sorry.
No, it isn't. It is just a hallucination. It's just you spamming the I want to speak button. It's just that. But okay, George, the floor is yours.
Just briefly, Lucas pointed out, you know, if we appeal to Scripture as the source of divine law, you have the issue of, well, what about, you know, before the Scripture was written down? And that's fair. I think my main point was that from the religious perspective, right, the God who is the source of Scripture is the source of divine law, you know, and that applies before it's written down even. And to that extent, if that religious perspective is true, should probably separate it from cultural law to a certain extent, right? If there's a God who's over and above creation, right, he transcends culture and all that. Now, if you're coming at it from a non-religious or a naturalistic perspective, there's nobody up there, right? So it all just is culture, so you can subsume it all into the cultural law heading. So whether or not there's somebody up there, of course, is a discussion for another time. I'm still getting oriented here with the discussion. I think this is interesting. So I'll kick it back to you, Lucas.
I don't want to take long because it looks like a lot of people are excited and want to talk. I'll just give one quick background item, and that is the first law codes come into being once cities come into being. So 3500 BC, you see the first cities emerge, and it's within the context of the city that the first law codes get written down. Now, that doesn't mean that there wasn't law before that, but it wasn't written down, at least where we haven't found it. There had to have been some type of custom through which people were in unspoken kind of oral law through which people interacted and kind of knew what to do and what not to do. When you look at the first law codes, there are a lot of just eye for an eye stuff. You kill somebody, you get killed. You steal, we take money from you. And that seems to be the basic first laws that emerge from a city culture. Of course, it still has the divine idea is in there. So the idea of retribution and God and justice, they think that they're reflecting what's going on in nature. So they also see it as natural law. These things are all intertwined with one another, and it's only later in history where they try to get separated. But that's all I want to say. Just giving kind of a quick historical background to think about where it came from, how it's separated, and kind of what we're talking about now.
Thank you. Very insightful. Yeah, I mean, and again, we don't have to respond this right now since we're still kind of like trying to like move a little bit more forward the conversation, but also what happened in some period in our time that we decided, hey, let's separate this and make it more complicated. This is not working. You know, I think that's also something that would be nice to talk. But I mean, Yusha is very excited about speaking, so I'm not gonna take much of his time. Just go ahead.
Hey, thanks, guys. Sorry I joined a little late. I was with a client for a consultation. But hey, laws, yay. Okay, so we see we talked about laws and we went briefly over them. But did we ever try to stop and think that maybe someone in power made laws to limit and control someone without power? Like, if you look at it throughout history, generally the laws are made where the rich excel, the powerful excel, but when it comes to the middle class, lower middle class, or even lower class, they are the ones being trampled. Taxes in the US, you have freedom of speech depending on your status in the UK, and stuff like that. So if we translate it into those of you who are religious, please don't take it the wrong way. I'm just saying it too for the sake of the conversation. I'm very religious myself, but it's philosophy club and we can say what we want here. So if we translate that to the eternal law, where it's someone up there, whether it's God, Allah, or whoever else you might believe in, to be the divine power, does it not seem to pick up the pattern where the powerful only make laws or regulations to say that, hey, you can't do this because blah, blah, blah? Like, again, I'll take the example of taxes, where the rich people don't actually pay nearly as much in taxes as much as the common folk do. Same thing goes for cultures and traditions. If you look at the Middle Eastern culture, only a certain people can sit in a certain type of gathering. If you look at the Hindu tradition, their religion, their culture, they still follow the caste system, where they have separate castes. I believe it's 5 or 7. I don't exactly know how many castes they have, but even in between the castes, the top caste or whatever, they are usually, how they had in ancient Egypt, where the priests were on the top, then you had the teachers and all those different categories. It's the same for Hindus, and a lot of the cultures and religions inspired by Hinduism, it still follows the caste system, which is again a implementation of laws that are set to separate and distinguish people from one another. Now, if we say that, okay, we cannot live without laws, because then it would be an outright, mutiny or destruction, whatever. Like, we need laws. Yeah. Why do we need laws? Because we as humans cannot even control ourselves, let alone control someone or something else. So if you look at it, it's a bittersweet thing in a very sick and twisted way that we need to control something because we cannot even control ourselves.
Yeah, I mean that is, and my dog is wanting some attention. Anyways, yeah, you're right. I do believe that that's part of the reason why we needed to create new laws. I mean, at some point, our society became so complex that required something more specific than just don't kill and don't steal or whatever. So it does make sense. Now I know, and this is just a question, Marcus. I know that you put the exclamation mark in the wrong spot, but you were still writing. You just want me to read what you were writing, or you still want to address something in particular?
Oh no, I spoke when I meant to spoke, and I just wrote because I wanted to write. No, I'm off the queue for now.
Okay, so I'm just gonna read what you said. He said, when laws are made for the sake of lawmaking, we should recognize that we are too separated as a people from divine law, so to combat that we make too many laws to contain man, and from there it can become messy and crossover happens. It's illegal to kill a rabbit on a Tuesday in May in Illinois. So yeah, it's very, and then George is curious to know what can cause separation among people. Um, yeah, and before Mansi speaks, I also have this question because not only, I mean, yes, I understand that we have these laws so we can coordinate our life, but not all the time laws are actually good for us. Sometimes law is just damaging. That's it. Like it just damage more than it actually help. So at one point, it is okay to break the law. Like just because something is a law does that mean that we just like, you know, because there's some doctrines that they believe like, hey, a law is a law. The people who put it knows better. You should just follow it because it's for the greater good. But that time, like sometimes that's not true. Sometimes it's not really for the greater good. It's just for the good of maybe 2, 3 people. So like, what about those laws? Oh well, just gonna throw that. Nancy, the floor is yours, and then I continue reading.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. Yeah, I want to take it back to something Luke was saying, and that we kind of branched off of from there. This idea of the interconnectedness, at least maybe initially, historically in the West, with all these various laws, and I want to unite that with what I heard Yusha speaking on, and Marcus before that. This idea of not that there's too many cooks in the kitchen, but that maybe the reason why there are so many laws has to do with nature. So again, for example, it's according to nature that if you drink alcohol or you drink poison, it will have a certain effect on you. And that's just has to do with human biochemistry. And the effect isn't necessarily not productive. The effect isn't necessarily going to benefit those around that person if that person has too much to drink and then tries to do things that normally that person would be free to do, but perhaps now physically isn't, but they still want to attempt to do that. What I'm getting at is this. I want to discuss the sort of intersection here and possible contrasting nature, you might say, of freedom, justice, and what we're calling the laws, which you might call governance. To Yusha's point, it does seem as though the laws are there to serve us. And so those who enforce the laws, they're called civil servants. And so that implies that it's for our best interest. This isn't the Twilight Zone. How best to serve humans. This is, realistically, anybody get that deep cut? Thank you, George. That was a classic. Luke got it, but he pretended like he didn't. Thanks, buddy. The idea is this, that it seems as though laws are there to both maximize and prohibit our freedom. So they prohibit our freedom when it's dangerous for us to be that free given certain conditions, like driving under the influence, when your body chemistry suggests that you're not capable of operating a motor vehicle responsibly. But you might say, well, no, that's an impediment on my freedom. I should be in charge of what I put in my body and how much I put in my. So I'm trying to come up with a more concrete sort of way of seeing how even now, not just historically, natural law, civil law, these are still, especially when I'm talking morality, then you can talk divine law. They're all still connected. It might not be as obvious, but this is why we have laws. Because human beings have to deal with nature, and that includes dealing with one another. So is too much law, is that the equivalent to too little freedom? Is too little law the equivalent to too much freedom? I mean, these are the questions. And I think a lot of it ultimately gets rooted in the kind of thing we are by nature. And then if you want to take it one step further, the kind of thing we were created to be through nature. Okay.
Yeah.
Created by whom? Who knows? Yeah.
All right. So I'm going to read the comment that George said. He said, I was listening to a podcast about Hinduism and the other day, and I learned that the cultural and religious aspects are very much intertwined for those who practice. He living in the caste system and the practicing the religion are the same thing. I approve of the dog. I'm assuming he's approving Marcus' dog. And then Marcus is, oh, you got me messed up with that piece, man. See, oh my God. He's just freaking out right now, but you cannot tell. It's just all in the chat. uh, well, anyways, uh, I forgot what I was about to say. I did have something to say. Come back to me, Fernando. Anyways, I'm gonna let George speak, and then I will try to remember.
I think I'm basically just agreeing with what Manzi just said, trying to parse out the relationships between all the different kinds of laws. And I'm trying to pull up a whiteboard here to see if I can draw on it, because like it's going to be really difficult to just say through text. Okay, let's see if this works. So let's say, here's one way to look at it at least. You got, oh, I hate that font so much. But you got God up here, right? And let's say he makes, where's that? There it is. He makes nature. He makes nature, right? So we have to, but he also makes a, so nature, natural law. Like he designs the universe, but at the same time he defines a moral or religious or whatever law. Okay. So how humans treat each other, right? So to use Manzi's example, right? He makes it so that you get drunk if you drink too much wine, and being drunk in this means that you're impaired. Okay. That's just how he made it. So in his moral or religious law, okay, let's do this. There's influence. There's influence here. Don't get drunk and hurt your neighbor, right? That's a moral law that God made, but he also made it, and it's also influenced by nature. We all following this here. Then what we've got is societal laws that are ideally going to reflect what God wants. Now, there's a problem here. It doesn't happen perfectly. We can't all agree on what God wants, and even if we did, we don't always put it into practice perfectly. And furthermore, you got corruption. Okay, so people, instead of actually trying to follow this in good faith, are, and even if they're not religious, right, they're still trying to do what's moral. They're not even doing that. They're literally just trying to serve themselves. So I don't know where I'm going with this. I'm just trying to put what Manzi was saying together. This is the way I kind of conceive of things.
Yeah, if you want to add this to a religious context, you literally actually just drew the way Aquinas thinks about law. Now you just need to have something below that where human law is trying to merge those two things, the nature of God and the expression of human beings in society, and that is what he calls human law. So it is your drawing, and it is the way that Aquinas also thinks about law as it relates to God.
And this is, I think, where, thank you, Lucas, this is where what you were saying was coming in, where, like, it used to be all one thing, right? You'd have a city, you'd make the laws, these laws are from God, right? That was the picture. Is the thing that caused the separation, the Enlightenment, and kind of this, modern, like, rationalism and all that, where we kind of did God out of everything? Would that be correct?
If you want to think about it historically, I think the easiest way is just to think that there's three different eras. The first is the era where the divine is infused in the ruler. You see this in Egypt, you see this in Mesopotamia, you see this in Europe, where the kings have a divine mandate to rule. So the divine is actually placed inside the ruler, who speaks with the mouth of God. You get something different when you get into Greece, especially when they started democracy. And now law becomes equals of the group, but the group are landholders who are invested in the society. It doesn't apply to the slaves. It doesn't apply to women, but all of the men come together. And so you see the democratic idea. And now the divine separates. So you have and you get arguments in philosophy over the difference between human-made law versus divine law, because there's no divine mandate. No one person is speaking the divine. And then later, after the Enlightenment, you see the complete separation, where what is called positive law. Positive means we posited. This is like what we talked about in the beginning of, it's our laws. We make them. We create society. So if you think about it as those three different ways of looking at law, I think that's a good way to categorize it, where you can see it historically.
Okay, that's helpful. That's helpful. If y'all will permit me to kind of continue sketching here, I'm going to try to map out kind of another way to look at this, the way I understand it, at least. We got. Okay, thank you, teams.
So while you're doing that, I want to respond to what Professor Manzi said when he was talking about civil law. So he's talking in a modern context, and he's saying, well, we don't have anybody here which we're going to agree has a divine mandate. So we actually have to make laws which help us all flourish. So now we all have to be part of this discussion about what a good civil law is, and how we can all flourish, and what it means for a human being to make something that allows us to do better in society.
Depending on what you mean by us. And that gets back to Fernando's point.
Yeah.
I like the drawing, George. Has anybody ever gone with the whiteboard app feature?
I didn't even know you could.
I
am
philosophy.
Awesome.
I am super keen on drawing things out. And then what you got
I can testify for that. It's true. Like we meet, I mean, the last couple of weeks has not been happening, but we meet basically weekly, and he always tries something.
So here's kind of another way to look at it, right? There's no God up here, right? So you have nature, which is very firm, a very strict master, right? You jump off a cliff, you fall, and so forth. And then over here is just this mess of, really, it's all man, right? Man relating to himself and society and making rules that apply back to the individual. Man claiming the role of the divine and essentially making that up and using that to oppress other man and using that to influence society. So it's like this big mess of, it's just us and nature. I'm sure I'm sure there's more the actual philosophers can add to this scheme here, but this back and forth is, man fighting against nature, we use technology and so forth to overcome natural law, but also natural law has a way of stomping on us when we don't have technology to help. And then over here is just a big old mess. Go for it, Manzi.
Have you ever read Paradise Lost? Or are you familiar with it?
Familiar, yes. Read, no.
Well, here's. Let me cut to the chase. Given everything you said, given your schema there, which I think is great, very very helpful. And I know actually Lucas is a big fan of drawing things out too, so kinship there. Could you argue that it's okay? You know what? Let me put it differently. Hypothetically speaking, let's say we believe it's God's will for us to master the laws of nature as He created them. Ought we continue to go in that direction? Or, and here's why I bring up the Paradise Lost reference. A big part of that Paradise Lost is the protagonist talking to the fallen angel Raphael. When I say protagonist here, I mean, of course, Adam. Maybe you've heard of him. So Adam, the point being is this: his curiosity gets the best of him, and that's why humanity falls. And so the idea there, the message behind Paradise Lost is that human beings, while they were given the gift of intelligence, which is what we use to quote unquote master the laws of nature, it might not necessarily be designed for that kind of use. That humanity can't forget its humility, lest it mistakes itself for God's. Because what does God do? God masters the world. He controls nature. Human beings are trying to do the same, and we're doing it with the means by which we've been provided, namely our intelligence. And we've done it in ways that are seemingly innocuous. You can put on a squirrel suit and fly over a mountain now. You can fly. We have the technology. I won't go into that famous comedy bit, but you can literally board a plane and miraculously fly 3,000 miles in a matter of hours. So the idea being is this. If we are to continue to go, well, let me take a step back. What should we do? Should we continue to go down this road? If we believe that this is sort of like the essence of the divine law, is to maximize the part of you that is Christ-like, which is again your rationality. Again, God is all-knowing. Humans can know some things. That's the derivation. Or ought we sort of to remain sterile in a sense, where if we go too far, then we're ruining what it was that God created. And again, I'm speaking in terms of the Christian God, because that's sort of the example that we're working with. But you could reframe that in terms of any sort of divine source of law. And it's finally worth mentioning that divine laws are typically interpreted as imperatives, not suggestions. Customs, you can argue, are suggestions. These laws are imperative. And if you feel as though the societal laws are absolutely linked to some sort of divine law, well, then now they take on a whole new level of dare I say, sacredness. Where if you transgress against your fellow man, you're transgressing against God. And I think that was Jesus's message.
I want to add a little flesh to that with a quick example, because it's interesting, because it's not just divine law, it's also natural law. So if you read religious thinkers in the medieval ages, they'll say things like they'll struggle over whether they should read at night with candlelight, because you are going against the natural order of things. God has not provided you light, so what makes you think you can go against the natural order of things and create your own light to read at night? And it goes to the extent to which we think we can. Exactly as Professor Manzi was saying, that we can alter the natural order of things. Wearing glasses, wearing contacts. Shouldn't you just allow your eyesight to degrade as God has made those eyes to degrade? It gets into some really interesting and fun questions.
That happened to Milton. Actually, he went blind.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and again, like sometimes, like, and I think some religions do that. Like, what if your life depends on it? What if you are about to die and you can actually save you? But if, I mean, if by doing so you're going against those laws, like then some people just like let themselves die because it goes against their religion. Um,
Yeah, anti-vaxxers.
This is definitely a good question, and I don't know the answer. Like, it's complicated, right? As Manzi pointed out, under the Christian perspective, right, God has given humanity a role kind of over creation where he's given us like creativity and intelligence and all this stuff to be able to do cool stuff like build rockets and go to the moon and build glasses for schmucks like me who lose their vision, right? So how do you tell the difference between a good use of those creative abilities and a, shall we say, sinful use? Broadly, I would suggest, this is where we carefully and, prayerfully and honestly look to scripture or divine revelation and try to glean some principles, right? Learn God's character and then try to apply those things. But I'm not going to sit here and pretend that that is a simple process. It's a difficult process and people disagree about it. That's where we get this, right? There's this up here and then there's this down here, and like it's hard. It's hard to figure it out. And I'm in the camp that the squirrel suits are totally fine, but you know, eventually if we replace our whole bodies with machines, is that going to be good or bad? I don't know. There are some questions that are like super complicated. But yeah, that's my take. Generally go for scriptural principles, learn God's character and so forth, and do your best to act ethically and probably debate people who disagree with you. That'd be my take.
But let me ask you this, George. Kind of a different angle to take here. Okay, so yeah, Biden is ostensibly the leader of the free world right now. How important do you think it is for voters Biden's religious affiliation, or any presidential candidate for that matter? Especially if they're if they are the ones who are shepherding our freedom. And it's important for most people of a religious background to, again, the law, as we're talking about, the laws have to be commensurate with one's interpretation of the divine source of existence, however shallow or in depth that may be. But have we seen that recently? Like, has the religious framework of the person running for president, has it played a significant role? Because I think that'd be very telling, one way or the other. What do you think? In other words, have we lost the connection that we've been discussing so long? Has the general public sort of not, or maybe no longer prioritizes as much the religious context of what laws they may pass, of what laws the presidential, we'll just say the POTUS might pass? I don't know.
I
think it's important. I remember, I know that sometimes, at least this is what I have seen, some people attack presidents based on the belief that they may not be from the main religion that the country follows. I'm not going to name any names, but sometimes they feel like, no, this person has an agenda that does not go according to our beliefs. So they just kind of like think that they're maybe the enemy. But yeah, I think George wanted to say something.
Could you restate the question for me briefly here? I'm grasping.
Yeah, let me ask you this. Okay, we'll go individual. Does it matter to you, George, what religion the president is? And would that impact you in terms of your voting proclivities? Okay, I'll give you another example. I know plenty of people who won't vote for a president if that president isn't overtly Christian.
Okay, yeah, I'm not in that camp. I'm looking for common values,
Okay.
and I'm in a difficult spot politically right now, I'll be honest. I was raised conservative, and Trump kind of really blew that up for me. So I'm lost. As far as like what policies are good for the country and things like that, I'll be honest, I'm in the dark. I'm in a really confused spot right now. But to answer your question, looking for common values. You know, obviously, if somebody, um, claimed to be a Christian and actually like acted that out, right? There's a good chance our values would overlap. So I'd look to that. But I'm very skeptical of this entire like Republican co-opt of Jesus that has happened in this country in the past few decades. That whole thing has left a very, very bad taste in my mouth, to say the least.
Yeah, and I don't think you're alone. And again, I only bring it up because getting back to the starting part of this conversation, how much does it matter to maybe individuals who are living in a nation where they are afforded rights, inalienable rights, ostensibly, again. How much does it matter to people, members of that society? The source of the laws, the source of the values that dictate the laws. If everybody is more or less benefiting to various extents from these laws, if the laws are serving a practical, clearly observable practical value, I wonder if most people don't really care what the president believes in, so long as the values that everybody can get on board with are being concretized in policies, in actions, things along these lines. And that's interesting because, as Luke was saying earlier, I'm sorry, Professor Ulrich. Luke is insisting on being formal. As Professor Ulrich was stating earlier, historically speaking, they were indelibly intertwined. If you couldn't trace a law right back to a divine justification, then you disregard the law. But now it seems like, and even George, you're kind of expressing this position. No, so long as the car is running, I don't really care what kind of engine it has. Very interesting, very telling.
Well, yeah, I think we just brought the two diagrams together because as long as we're doing things that allow for the flourishing of the human being, so much as we can agree to that, then I'm not saying we can get rid of the idea of God, but we can at least dampen it to some extent where both groups can get along.
Or perhaps I'm just a hypocrite.
Okay, but I mean, we have Eva here on the chat. She is saying, as long as my computer allows me to read it. Okay, she said, I care more personally about their actions with power than any religious nominee has. They never seem to actually embody whatever religion they follow. I mean, look at Trump. He was not actually religious at all. He yet had highest numbers of any previous press among evangelical Christians. And then Marcus said he claimed the Bible was his favorite book and then could not share any verse that he enjoyed when asked to share some of his favorites. And he shared a link if anybody is interested in seeing that that aspect out there. It's okay. That's about it with the queue so far.
But he took a photo with it in front of a church. Doesn't that count?
I think we
It might
can
have
argue.
been held it right side up.
Yeah, I mean he definitely went through a lot of trouble to go to that place and get the Bible and take the picture. He moved a lot of obstacles.
Let me throw this, and maybe this will be the last talking point because we're about over time. We started a little late, so we can go a little late. Kind of challenging something Eva said. Not challenging, but just kind of pushing back a little. Let's say, for example, that there's a presidential candidate whose policies you support, and in your mind, they make the most sense. and it does seem to have values that correlate to your own, and you think it's going to be good for everybody. And then you find out he worships Satan or she, and then you have to, but that person says, nonetheless, the values remain the same. The policies will go into effect. I'm not being hypocritical. I just happen to believe in the devil as the primary source of everything. Would that bother you? Or would you rather have a candidate who has more of a traditional sense of divinity, but whose values and policies don't align with your own? How important is it, is what I'm wondering. And I think a lot of people are kind of like, relate to George. It's like, I don't know. It's tough to say. And that's not a bad response. I think it's a very typical response right now.
Well, but if you compared somebody saying that I believe in Satan versus somebody like me who says they're agnostic, one of those would come across potentially a little less extreme than the other. So some voters might be able to go along with that a little easier.
Good point.
Good point. Yeah, and we have the prodigal son has returned. John, you were trying to come over here and talk, and now you do. Welcome.
Please don't feed my ego that much.
I mean, we're about to leave, so that way I can just give you on a good note. I don't want you to take anything too heart.
Eva, what were you wanting to say, Eva?
I was just gonna say that, I mean, I personally wouldn't care if they were a Satanist if all of their policies aligned with me and their actions previously had indicated that they would actually follow through. They weren't accepting any money from corporate interests. Then I would, but I don't really care. It's more about like the actual person. I mean, they could literally be saying whatever my religion is, is like their goal is to destroy my religion. That's their personal belief. As long as they don't implement that into government, I really don't care, because I'm not going to implement my personal beliefs or push them on someone else. But as far as laws and governing, if we align on, policies and principles, then that'll definitely be the person I support. So, yeah. I mean, I think we already do the lesser of two evils. So I'm like, I don't want to vote for evil. If not voting for evil means voting for a Satanist, okay, I guess.
What would be the greater evil than that?
Yes. Well, that's what's so interesting.
Anybody in power right now? I'm sorry, I'm very cynical.
Satanist claiming to be Christians.
Well, I like, first of all, yeah, Eva, you're very consistent, which I appreciate. And yeah, it's interesting that it seems like the standard by which Eva judges evil would be how it affects humans on a concrete level. That's more the standard by which we judge something as evil than the particular divinity. I think that's a great response. What else we got here in the queue?
We have George in the queue.
Yeah, so I think here to answer this question, we're having a difficulty here in my mind because it's a hypothetical question, right? Man claims to worship Satan, but somehow has the same values and policies that I theoretically agree with. Would I vote for him, right? So, like, is this guy literally, like, just to take the hypothetical situation, practically a Christian, right? For all the values and all the policies and most of the beliefs, except he calls who I call God or Jesus, he calls Satan, right? We're playing word games now. That person seems very implausible to me to actually exist. On the other hand, you have somebody who could be a Satanist who is really just like an agnostic or an atheist who uses Satanism, or I'm a member of the Church of Satan, right, as a way to get on evangelicals' nerves. That person may or may not have values or policy that I agree with, and I can appreciate, a good riff, a good bit of sarcasm, a good bit of snark. So I may or may not vote for that person. But the third hypothetical Satanist believes in the real supernatural Satan, the real living force of horror and evil, and worships that person, worships that evil. Their values and policy are not going to align with mine. they are ultimately going to be a deceiver like the one they worship. So that third hypothetical person, no. The other two, maybe. So like it's difficult to answer these sort of things. So here's what you got: your beliefs influence your values; those influence policy. But the problem is we're all imperfect and we're all hypocritical, right? So it's a big old mess. It's a big old mess. So it's really hard to answer. I think the heart of your question is what's more important, beliefs or policy, or beliefs or values or policy. And my answer is it's really going to come down to the individual candidate and the big complex, like my complex understanding of who they are as a person and a candidate. It's going to be a case by case decision. This does matter. This does matter because it's ultimately going to influence the other two.
Yeah, I agree. And again, I loved your analysis. I think it was really good. Have you ever seen a movie called The Devil's Advocate starring Al Pacino? Charlize Theron? Yeah, so at one point he says Al Pacino's the devil, spoiler alert. And he's a lawyer in New York. And he says to a young, naive Keanu Reeves, he says to him, I am the last real humanist. Maybe I'm the only real humanist. And so, look, not that I'm familiar with the tenets of the Church of Satan or whatever, but from what I understand, it's not so much they worship the devil, it's that they prioritize human beings over God. And so if you adopt that perspective, it seems very plausible that you could have a true quote-unquote humanist who says human beings are the be-all, end-all, let's treat them as such. And they'll pass a lot of policies that are very valuable and very beneficial because they're doing it for the sake of humans, not for the sake of God. So I don't think it's that implausible.
Yeah, that would be kind of the middle case, right? And I said, I might vote for that person or I might not. I consider myself a Christian humanist, but it might be more of what humanism meant back in Reformation times, more so than now. But yeah, that'd be the middle hypothetical candidate. And yeah, maybe I would vote for that person if we agreed on what's best for humanity. Everybody, I think, understands that we need to take care of each other, right? So this is important, but I lean toward the pragmatic side.
I hear you. And again, you did answer the question, which was, is this connection important? And you were very clear. Yeah, it is important. I agree. Don't get me wrong. I'm just playing the devil's advocate. All right, folks.
Somebody put a stop to
As
him.
always. As always, if you do it so often, wouldn't that make it like just your normal state of being?
Yes. It's a secret to my pedagogy. I just realized something. I wonder if this entire video, when we post it on YouTube, it's just going to be the sharing of the whiteboard.
Well, no, not entirely, but it will be there for sure.
It'll be there for 45 minutes.
Yeah, they better get used to it.
All right. Well, here, you could probably stop sharing the whiteboard now, George. Look at that dog.
Oh, there we go.
All right.
I didn't mean to have that up there for so long.
Well, no, it was helpful because I kept going back to it. Like I kept looking at it, so I appreciated it. All right. Well, I guess that'll do it. Does anybody else have any final thoughts or any?
Ava did.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Wait, I think before. Yeah.
I was basically gonna say. Sorry. I was just basically gonna say similar to what you were saying, Nancy, that I personally do know some people that are Satanists or Wiccans or whatever, and they're different things. I'm not trying to put them in the same, but that is not what a lot of people think, and those things are, for one. And I would also like completely argue and push back that those things have made any difference, because there's like majority of Christians in Congress and in power in the United States, and there's not much difference in the way that they're ruling comparatively, like between Democrats and Republicans. It's almost like you have to be Christian, maybe now, or Jewish to be in government. And it's not that really makes a difference. So to me, I like the idea of a Satanist, even though we do not align. Just because if this hypothetical person sounds better than anybody I've met or seen so far. But I just think people are really complex, and that when we just put this label on them, it completely takes away the conversation, like George said, like we will not align on values. And I think that that's a harmful way, a deconstructive way to actually like approach it, because instead of like, okay, well, maybe we do agree, it's like, no, because of this label, we won't agree, which is my thing with the left, right, and all of that. It's more a top-down thing. It's more about elitism and the rest of us. And we have more in common with each other, even if our religions are vastly different, than people that do not share our values. And we have to be open to them sharing our values, even if we have already labeled them something that's contradictory. That's all. Thanks.
Thank you so much for that insight. I keep seeing people wondering what is going to be the next topic for the next week. That's actually our next step to set up the meeting as like we used to do before. We do have a couple of topics like that we can just go back, but if you have a topic that you personally want to discuss next week, feel free to suggest it. Then we'll go to vote, and then we go with it. That's really how it goes. Do you want me to bring up the past week topics suggested or no?
Yeah, we could do that. But I mean, is there anything maybe, because this seemed like a very natural topic given last week's topic on utopias. Is there anything that sort of maybe lends itself kind of organically, topic-wise for next week, given what we talked about today? Maybe Satanism? I'm joking. Yeah. I don't know. I feel like we really did a good job of exhausting this topic in just, about an hour. Or do you have any sort of wacky, out of left field topics that you just want to, because the summer's the time to do that. We can explore anything.
What about, do things like happen for a reason? Like, is there, does timing of things, matter? Do that, that kind of, the question of fate, essentially, then, like fate, but not just fate, but the, just like we were saying, Manzi, that you were saying, what Boethus did, the combination that God knows all, or, it is all already there, but humans still have free will within that. I like that idea. I think it's almost an impossible question to answer, and I'm curious to see how many sides we can get to that.
So how would you phrase it so I can write it in the chat?
Maybe
You can say.
No, go for it.
Fate
No,
and free will.
I guess divine will versus free will. I guess divine. I don't know, or
Divine foreknowledge.
Fate versus destiny.
I don't like the word fate. People think it robs them of free will.
Free
will?
will?
For now, will versus free will.
Yeah, free will and fate.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, let's do that. Free will and fate.
Or free will versus self-will.
Huh?
Oh, no.
There's actually been a lot of different ideas throughout history of fate and how it functions in different societies. So we could both look at it historically and the debate between free will and
things happening.
Freedom.
Yes, let's do that. Yeah. Free will and freedom. Oh no, the front door is unlocked.
Shut the front door.
I gotta walk around my house with a bat now. Hold on.
Okay. Any other topic?
I like that, Lucas. I like that point. I like that.
Hey, it's yours. I'm just piggybacking.
You made it better though. So, all right, I dig that.
Okay.
I'm excited.
But again, any other topic?
There was flow of time last week where Marcus was like, "I want one, damn it," and I quote the voice as well.
It'll we'll get into the flow of time with that topic. I promise you. Actually.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say when you were talking about fate and how destiny and free will and all that stuff.
So
I was like, yeah, last week was
will flow of time be a different topic, or just
let's just stick with this one.
Yeah, it's just it's a sub of that.
All right.
Let's just stick with what Professor Ulrich and Marcus suggested.
If everybody else likes the topic, then yes. I'm gonna put it in the chat for the moment. Boop, it's right there. Would that be good for you all? Fate versus free will and freedom.
It's fate.
Oh yeah, I like that. That's pretty good, I think.
All right. Okay.
How did
Faith
faith
or
come into
fate?
it? I thought we were fate versus. Oh, was that just a typo?
Oh, fate. Okay, I like them both.
Fate
Faith
versus
or
Oh.
fate.
free
Kind of
will.
work.
I was reading
No,
that out.
I
Okay, yeah.
Faith.
Fate.
That's
Yeah,
right.
fate.
Actually, I think we're going to end up having to put faith in there because you have the problem
Yeah.
of divine foreknowledge and divine ordinance of God controlling fate. So
Yeah,
faith,
Well,
we have
not-
faith
free
is part
will.
of it.
See, Professor Ulrich, that would not be the only case, because if you take into the Greek mythology, where Heracles and the three sisters of fate, who prematurely tried to cut Heracles's thread of life, or whatever they call it, and what happened to them, then you have the Romans, you have the Greeks, you have the Norse, you have the Icelandic, you have the traditional Christian and Muslim and that kind of New World stuff. So we're gonna have to touch up on both of them, whether it's fate or faith.
Yeah, yeah, I
I
agree.
think it's gonna happen, even if I write it down or not. But it's fun to have it. Just saying. But anyways, it's written there. If there is not objection, then that will be the topic for next week. So talk now or whatever, hold your peace.
Yeah.
All right. So that's it.
I'll
They
be
said
here
it.
if I can be here, y'all. Sounds like a fun one.
Marcus, since you wanted this topic so bad, I swear to God, if you're not here next week,
Yeah,
I
he.
will
that-
be here.
no, 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 no. Jusha, I second that motion. Normally, when Marcus said the topic, he doesn't appear in the topic, and we have to just go ourselves to do what was his idea. That's his
I got
pattern. Yeah,
then we have to
No,
be pretend.
we have
Then
it
we have to
recorded.
pretend that we're
I'm gonna
Marcus.
clip this part, and I'm gonna make it public everywhere, and on social
I
media and
do.
everything.
That way
Yeah.
I'm held accountable.
I'm gonna attack you. Say, Marcus, you better be in the next meeting. He's gonna be the star member, and if you don't appear, well, you just let everybody down.
I won't. I promise. I'll be here. I'll be here, guys.
We'll see if it's your fate to be here next week.
I will use my free will to be here.
Perfect.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you so much again, everyone. So
Bring
yeah,
in.
again, as I mentioned in the first place, check us out on social media. If you're interested in an opposite position, let us know. I will hook you in. I know dealing with Nancy and the spawns is a little bit tedious. I know, but there's something good there's something good somewhere. If you look really hard, so just get into it, and it's gonna be fun. Um, Besides that, we have our meeting next week. Be in the lookout for more information about the regard. Is there something else that somebody else want to add?
I think we're good.
Okay, and look at John there with his beer and his glasses to
Oh,
close with like the better
That's an
note.
epic year, John.
Yeah, like let me actually, I'm gonna pinpoint him. There you go, spotlight. So he's gonna be the face of. There you go. He is the face for
The
everyone.
face of philosophy.
There you look at that. I'm gonna close with that. I'm gonna make that the
He looks
the
like
face for the video on YouTube.
I mean,
All right.
Socrates.
Okay, I'm gonna
Hey
stop the
Marcus,
recording.
is that an Australian Shepherd?
yes, a toy Australian.